Live from New York at the biggest show in legal technology, this is TECHNOCAT Live, and I am thrilled to have none other than Dan Broderick, the CEO of BlackBoiler here. I knew I was going to stumble on it. And let's get started. How awesome is it for you to be here?
It's great. It's always great to be in New York, and I appreciate that they had it in March again instead of February.
I was out and I wasn't worried about dodging snowdrifts or anything like that. It was like a win.
Yeah, it's the cold snow puddles that are the worst.
I believe the grayish water that you step into that is like an inch above freezing might be my least favorite.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's been great to see all the companies here and everybody here and the excitement around it. Lots of excitement around GPT and generative AI.
So have you heard the word ChatGPT 1,000 times or 10,000 times this week?
Yeah, I don't know. It might be north of that. But
well, you have a little expertise around ChatGPT. Like, what's your take on all this in terms of legal tech shockingly embracing it, kind of what the future holds?
Yeah, so I think right now it's really difficult to separate kind of the hype from what's real. I think we have people at ends of the spectrum. So there's people who at one end of the spectrum where it's like, never is going to be a lawyer again ever. And then
robo lawyers are coming.
Yeah.
It's like Skynet, and there's going to be like litigators holding signs. We'll litigate for food. Yeah. I know, yeah.
And then the other end of the spectrum are people who are just like, you see one hallucination or one mistake, and you say you can't use it. You can never trust it.
Well, and for folks that don't know, a hallucination is sometimes ChatGPT doesn't know an answer, so I don't know, it improvises.
Right. And so I think the reality is somewhere in the middle. The question is like, on what end of the extreme is it? And I think, a lot of what we're seeing now is just this initial marketing push of these products. And
the lawyers are like, oh, sparkly, I want to go have it.
Right. And so like we're experimenting with it. We've used it. We've implemented it in certain parts of our process. And it's incredibly impressive and doing some certain things.
In case my audience doesn't know, could you tell them a little bit about what BlackBoiler does?
Yeah, so BlackBoiler, we're software. We automate the process of high volume contract review and markup.
Oh, gotcha.
So we learn from how our clients review and edit contracts to create client-specific editing models that can review and mark up previously unseen documents. We do it and track changes in a Word document like a human would do.
Awesome.
And so part of our text processing pipeline would potentially include something like using a large language model for generating edits or revisions.
Well, and the reality is, like, ChatGPT might be the most hyped LLM, but there's a lot of them like BERT and MBERT that are already out there. I'm imagining you guys have some of that under the hood.
Yeah, we use BERT for sure.
Us too.
So yeah, it's interesting, and I mean, I think for like the newer things like the ChatGPT or OpenAI in particular, there are some certain things right now that are like the information security is going to be a huge piece.
And privacy. So, and IP, who owns it? Who owns the input? Can ChatGPT then take my code or my work product and say, oh, I'm going to go give it to Microsoft?
Right. And so I do think they've are addressing that. And I think they're going to have it figured out in probably the next 6 to 12 months. But it is interesting. Like companies like JP Morgan just said, like Jamie Dimon said, nobody's allowed to use it. Right.
Well,
so
I don't think they have figured out how to have a policy around it. And they want to have some people be, first across the bow to maybe stumble in a way that they can learn from. Because I guarantee if this continues as much as I think it will, 2-3 years from now, they're going to be like, just kidding, psych.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And it's clear just in like the announcements that OpenAI has released in the last month or so, it's clear that they understand that this is a problem, and they're moving towards how do we solve the infosec privacy ownership problems.
Well, it's good that I don't think they anticipated the adoption rate they had, and so it's actually good there's such a spotlight on it, so they can remediate this before people have built full platforms on it. So, blessing and a curse,
Yep, I agree. But I also think that there's design principles that have to be taken into account around this. Like, I don't think that the way to go is to turn all of our lawyers into prompt engineers. I mean, I see your social media posts, and how difficult.
ChatGPT did not write that. You can tell because there's typos.
It's funny. My first use of ChatGPT was to write LinkedIn posts. So
I wrote an article for Legal Tech News. I was working with Stephanie Wilkins on ChatGPT, and I actually had ChatGPT write one of the segments.
Yeah.
And then I ran it through AI detectors and like 10 plagiarisms. I'm like, well, you know what? It's not good, but it does pass the sniff test. It's
yeah,
crazy.
no, it does. It
I wouldn't
absolutely
hit
does.
send and actually publish it if I didn't like disclose. Written by ChatGPT, not me, I promise.
Yeah, that's 100% right. But I think that with the design, we have to be thinking about how do we make it part of the system where we're not taking our lawyers and turning them into something or having to retrain them in mass to get them to be able to adopt these products. It just doesn't make sense because like, the struggles of just having people adopt AI in general. And so then to say like, okay, you're going to adopt this AI, but then you have to learn how to be a prompt engineer on top of that.
Yeah.
That's going to be very difficult.
An opportunity for junior folks or folks looking to pivot, sort of
Yeah.
like when e-discovery got the E. But I also think like the ChatGPT incorporated in the tech is only one piece of the puzzle.
Yep.
The other piece is, as a legal professional, you need to know what to tell your clients about it, because if my grandpa and my nephew and like the 5-year-old across the street are all using ChatGPT, your clients are also using ChatGPT. So like thinking through those legal challenges is, even if you don't use it, you can't play ostrich. It's sort of the way I look at it.
I agree 100%. And I also like one of the big things I think is like we have to get the AI or the large language models to understand automatically what the prompt should be, instead of having the humans have to like go in and do the prompt.
Yeah.
And so like I think that's like a huge challenge for knowledge management, making sure your knowledge management is set up in a way that it can be used automatically for things. And it's like, it goes back to, if you're at a law firm, like, do you have all of your kind of like task codes coded properly?
What is
and all
your
of those
taxonomy?
things? Yeah, exactly. And so like, I think there's this whole piece of being able to use this in a really sophisticated way that will be adoptable and usable, that like has a lot of cleanup before we can kind of go and just like implement it.
And I'm always like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like if you're doing stuff with BERT for sentiment analysis or for identifying clause, don't rip it out and replace it with ChatGPT. Find some other way to use that in your workflow. Like I think it's a little bit of a distraction from just, hey, adopt the technology, but at least people are talking about it.
Yep, I agree.
So what is your advice then? And you can say plead the fifth, I'll give you that.
Sure.
But for lawyers that are just hearing about it now and kind of figuring out about it, like what's just kind of your kernel of wisdom you'd give them on, okay, it's here, what do you think?
For just like an everyday attorney using it, I would say use it, but you have to know its limitations and have to be able to spot its limitations. And
hallucinations.
Yeah. And so like if you're going to use it in like a mass production environment, you have to be able to spot those limitations without human input.
Yes.
The technology itself is going to have to understand the limitations.
Error flag or something.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, there's going to have to be some sort of throttle on what it does. Right.
We'll get there though. Like
No,
I think
absolutely.
with this many smart people working on it, I think it is going to dramatically shorten the development cycle for improvement. Like, I mean, even the fact that GPT-4 came out within 4 months of GPT 3.5, like, I think we're going to see an acceleration, hopefully.
Yeah, I haven't kept up as much on that. I mean, the little bit of that I read was that like every time they kind of up the ante, it takes like 10x increase in like processing power and cost and time and data.
Well, and that's why sometimes it's a blessing to work with something that requires less compute, but has the same result. It's a balancing act. I mean, as you know.
Yeah, I agree.
So, as I warned you, these are a sprint and not a marathon. We are tailing around to the end of this discussion, and it's time for my favorite question. Ready for it?
Sure.
What would your mic drop moment be? If someone's meeting Dan for the first time or hearing about BlackBoiler or thinking about ChatGPT, what's the one thing you want to take away from this discussion? Not to put any pressure on you, but go.
I don't think attorneys should have the choice to use AI. I think it should just be baked into the process automatically.
Could you say that again and louder?
I don't think attorneys should have the choice to use AI. I think it should just be baked into the process. That way we don't have to change the behavior of every single attorney.
I might cry a little because that is literally my thesis. Like, you should not be able to opt out of the way the world is going. I love that. There's literally no better way to end this conversation. My mic is dropped, and we are both all in on AI because you need to be. So, again, live from New York, this has been TECHNOCAT and Dan Broderick of BlackBoiler, and this was a pretty awesome podcast. Stay tuned for more.
All right. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.